Now, Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has officially launched his US presidential campaign for the 2024 election. But with technical glitches on the social media platform Twitter, it was not a smooth start. DeSantis now has to persuade the Republican Party that he is a better candidate than his main rival, the former US President Donald Trump.
Righting the ship requires restoring sanity to our society.
This is the slick campaign ad Ron DeSantis wants people to see.
I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
But the Florida governor made his actual presidential campaign launch on the social media platform Twitter. That involved a half-hour delay due to technical issues.
Tonight, I'm pleased to introduce two individuals who've done more to loosen the...
The sound cut out.
His commitment to freedom and his willingness to put his money
or
his mouth
became distorted. With only 420,000 listeners at its peak, DeSantis' launch was all rather underwhelming. Particularly for a man who's made his political career by successfully courting the right.
Our bottom line is we do not surrender to the woke mob. Florida's where woke goes to die.
This is a Republican heavyweight who's stacked up a number of wins for the right. Those include a ban on discussing gender identity and sexual orientation in schools in Florida. That's meant his presidential bid has already provoked protests, including in Miami. But it's this man who is DeSantis' biggest hurdle to securing the Republican candidacy. Polls show the former US President Donald Trump still has double the support of DeSantis. And while they used to be allies, they're certainly not now.
Okay, so remember this. Ron DeSantis. Did anyone ever hear of DeSantis? The sanctimonious DeSantis.
It will now be up to the Florida governor to convince the Republicans that he's the man they can rely on to win the White House.
We're joined now by Peter Bayer. He's the former transatlantic coordinator for the German government and a member of parliament for the Conservative Christian Democrat Party. Welcome to DW, Mr. Bayer. If I can ask you...
Hello from Berlin.
Diplomatic ties between the EU and the US were strained by the Trump presidency. If another Republican, whether DeSantis or Trump, wins the election in 2024, do you worry that we will see a return to that tumultuous era?
No, first of all, it's way too early to call who will make, the race. There are also others on the Republican side who already said they want to run for presidency, so we will wait and see. But just for a second, if we concentrate on Trump and or DeSantis, under Trump we have already some experience. You served as U.S. president for one term, and that were not the best times in transatlantic relations, to say the least. So if there would be a Donald Trump second round, I expect to be the transatlantic relations under pressure, to say the least. I think we would see a rough awakening, and we have to prepare for that right now. During the term, we concentrate on, strengthening the pillars of the transatlantic ties and modernizing transatlantic relations. DeSantis is a new figure on the international platform. He will be under observation from our side. I personally have not yet met him. I read a lot about him. I heard a lot about him, also last week in Washington when I was there to visit some friends. So, again, way too early to say.
Let's get more specific about the lessons that Germany and the EU learned from the Trump era, because looking at the war in Ukraine, it would seem that Europe is still as dependent on the US as ever.
Yeah, there's a lot of dependency, if you want to frame it that way, or put it a little bit more positively. There's a lot of independency. As you know, the United States of America is the closest ally that we have outside of the European Union. It is a real factor. By the way, in Germany, we have a special relationship because of, not only because, but also because of the nuclear sharing concept. We rely on the United States as the guarantor of our security, prosperity. As I indicated earlier, we have to, should I put it this way, to reshuffle responsibilities in the transatlantic alliance. And I'm not only talking about NATO on the military side. I see that we have to take up more responsibility. I think we have learned a lot of lessons out of the 4 years of Donald Trump's presidency, not only in a bad way, but also, you know, we educated ourselves, so to speak, with regard to military responsibilities, with regard to technology leadership, and several other things.
Okay. Now, Ron DeSantis is governor of Florida, and in that time he has implemented many controversial policies that don't fit so well with the values of Germany and the EU. Let's say he does become president. What would that mean for EU relations with the US? I mean, would he be called out on things that the EU simply doesn't agree with?
I am not afraid of either Donald Trump, DeSantis, or anyone. We would certainly congratulate any democratically elected president of the United States. Ron DeSantis, we are observing what he is doing in the state of Florida. A lot of things that need to be explained under, you know, the umbrella of very domestic politics, and I think we still have to learn a lot about who he actually is, what his politics are. So I think it's also a little bit too early to comment on what a perspective of a future Ron DeSantis U.S. president would be. I have my personal doubts that he would be so provocative, so like, should I say, right-wing populist like he is today. I don't think that he will be a president, if he would be elected, that would put a wedge in his own society. So again, I'm quite relaxed and super curious and interested how the Americans will decide and how the campaigns will go.
Peter Bayer, former transatlantic coordinator for the German government, I'd like to thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you a lot.
Let's get more from DW reporter Peter Röhle-Dahl. Morning to you, Peter. Tell us more about who Ron DeSantis is and maybe more importantly, what he stands for.
Right. Ron DeSantis is a second-term governor who just won re-election in a landslide back in November. He's massively popular in his home state, but he's also really controversial. He is essentially the face of an emboldened, ultra-conservative wing of the Republican Party, and he's racked up an astonishing record of really draconian policies in his home state. He's severely restricted access to abortion. He has restricted sex and gender identity education in schools. He's tried to crack down on the teaching of, you know, the U.S.'s very troubled history with race and slavery. And he's also gone really hard after the press. He's gone after the LGBTQ community. So he's really the face of a very conservative movement within the Republican Party. And he's proudly declared that under his reign, Florida is where woke goes to die. And he's running on a promise to really take that Florida blueprint national, apply that to the national state, and that really would shift the U.S. quite drastically in a very conservative direction.
I mean, this is the thing now, isn't it? He's taking his message from regional to national. So how well do you think that this whole political style will translate to a national audience?
It is really difficult to predict. There's certainly a very kind of fervent portion of the Republican Party that's very open to that. But we have also seen that a lot of people are, you know, especially when it comes to abortion, for instance, that was not a big seller for Republicans during the midterms back in November. They lost quite a lot of races that they should have won because of worries, among other things, over access to abortion. So it's not quite clear that his draconian policies would translate to a national level, you know, especially with more moderate Republicans and independents that are really, you know, a group that both parties are fighting for.
Just a quick question about foreign policy, Peter. There was a big sigh of relief here in Europe when Donald Trump was not re-elected. How would Europe potentially react to a DeSantis presidency?
Yeah, I think it's hard to overstate the trauma that the Trump presidency really inflicted on Europe and America's allies. Here in Europe, there was a sense that Trump really pulled the rug from under Europe and exposed a vulnerability, I think, also within Europe, its reliance on America to protect itself. And so I think a DeSantis presidency, it's not quite clear that it would be as isolationist as Trump was when he was presidency, but he's made statements such as, calling the conflict between Ukraine or the war between Ukraine and Russia really a territorial dispute. And so I think there is a fear that if Biden is not reelected, that could catapult Europe back to a era just of immense uncertainty, and it would put a lot of pressure on Europe to really step up. And I think one of the players that they would look to would be Germany to, really step up. So the question is, I think, if, Chancellor Olaf Scholz and other European leaders have learned the right lessons from the 4 years of Trump, and if they essentially created contingency plans to meet the moment.
DW's Peter Rolle-Dahl, thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Well, Social Democrat Metin Haqvedi is deputy chairman of the German-US Parliamentary Friendship Group. What sort of direction do you think the US would be going in under DeSantis?
Well, we are hoping not as bad as under President Trump, but we are not sure now. I think at this point it's fair to say that Mr. DeSantis is running an extremely interior campaign, and foreign policy is not too much of his interest. But we are not feeling really well about it.
Do you really think he's the one who could out-Trump Trump?
Well, at this point, probably he ran his campaign pretty late. Like with the technical issues tonight, he also had issues with his campaign, so he came out late, I assume. And looking at the numbers today, it will be very, very difficult for him to challenge Mr. Trump. But you never know. It's a long way. The primaries of the Republican Party, the debates are starting in August, so still some months to go. We will see.
And you said he doesn't have a specific focus on international relations. But how do you think a DeSantis presidency would reshape the world order that Biden's worked so hard to restore after that isolationist period under Trump?
Well, certainly it's going to would be worse for the transatlantic relation, but also for the world compared to President Biden's policy at this point. He will focus on the home front. So if it's worth spending money in Ukraine to make the numbers better in the U.S., he would do it. If not, he wouldn't do it. So it's very, very difficult to foresee. But listening carefully to what he's said so far, he's very critical about giving the support that is necessary in Europe towards Russia as it is now. So we have to expect less engagement than it is today.
Anything else we should look out for in the lead up to this election?
Well, for the Republicans, it will be super interesting how these campaigns will be run now inside. So it's not just the battle between him and Mr. Biden, and Mr. Trump. It's also other candidates are chipping in as well, right? We're expecting the former vice president to go in. We're expecting other candidates, and sometimes it's all about money. Who's getting the most financial support? So it will be a tough race. It's not over yet. Trump is in advance, obviously. The numbers are much better for him today, but that doesn't have to stay till the end or the beginning of next year. So let's see. 11 debates within the Republican Party will be a great show for everybody.
Well, you brought up the money factor there. Let me just pick up on that. Where does DeSantis fit in financially to this race?
Well, some Republicans are trying to tell the story supporting DeSantis that he will raise more money long term than Mr. Trump because it's in the interest, because everybody believes Mr. Trump would not win the presidential election, actually. And that's why they're counting on DeSantis to have a fair chance to win against Mr. Biden. So that might give him an advantage to raise money, but we will see. At this point, Mr. Trump is unbeatable, but there's still a few months, 10 months to go for the decision-making, so let's see how this works out.
Nice to get your views. Metin Hakvedi, Deputy Chairman of the German-US Parliamentary Friendship Group.
Thank you.